Hello everyone, my name is Scott and today we're going to be talking about wolf restoration. Yeah, I know the big bad has entered the room and I've been loved being called the Wolfman by multiple people. Feels great, honestly. But yeah, we're going to go through. Just got to summarize it here. Who am I, what I do, wolves as they are, because you might think you know what a wolf is, but it has been very skewed over centuries of what this animal actually is. And we're going to go over the history here in this nation. Issues in the landscape currently, because this is why wolf restoration is so important. We're going to go what they do for us, what they do for nature, what's stopping them, and what we can do to change that. So who am I? I'm this guy here. And this is Ozzy. Ozzy is a wolf dog, I should say, that I worked with at Green Acres Animal Park, not too far from here, actually. He's actually only 20% wolf. His daughter Luna, right there, she's closer to 70. And his son, who was in a different paddock, bit my bottom. Fun fact for that. He was actually in a music video. Can't remember, some rapper, but her mom was actually in Game of Thrones, and she was in the other paddock. Really, really cool. So I've met some wolf celebrities out there. I really, really like these animals. One day when I was a teenager, just out of nowhere, I was like, these are bloody cool. I like wolves. And no joke, I started working out because I was like, oh, wolves are, they're really, really healthy animals. I want to get physically fit, and that's where my exercise routine started. Weird fact, I know, I'm just a loony, as I said. I got my bachelor's at Liverpool John Moores University, and then I just finished my master's as an ecologist in Liverpool Hope University. And my thesis, my project, was looking at a hypothetical reintroduction of the grey wolf back into the Lake District National Park. I am an experienced tracker. I've been around the world looking at different species, not just wolves. I've swam in lakes and rivers where there's crocodiles. I've looked after injured monkeys and all sorts in Costa Rica, Guatemala. I've been around. I like to see what there is out there, and it has helped me get a better idea of what we're kind of lacking in biodiversity and ecological health, because it's a lot. I'm also a narrator. That's what I do to actually make money, because ecology doesn't pay. That's on YouTube, Nature's Temper. Like and subscribe.
If your next slide is just a QR code.
That would have been great. So this is me in Slovakia. So that is where I picked up my ability to discern wolf tracks. As a, wow. This is actually a wolf track that's probably 2 days old, because it's melted a little bit and it's rethawed. So that's slightly bigger than the actual, well, not this actual image isn't actual size, but we got to track wolves and lynx, which is the smallest apex predator in Europe. But we were trying to determine if wolves limit the amount of lynx in the area, because occasionally they will kill and eat lynx or chase them away. But what we found is that, no, lynx, as long as they stay near trees, can escape wolves just fine, and they perform another vital apex predatory role. But whilst I was there, I discovered so many cool things about wolves in their native range, because this is the same species we used to have here, the Eurasian grey wolf, Canis lupus lupus, the most wolfy wolf there is. So we took scat and blood samples. We'd follow these trails, because this is a track. How many wolves do you think that is?
Oh.
That can be an entire pack. Exactly. They hide their numbers from other packs. And unlike dogs, which kind of meander around when they go through anywhere, they go in a straight line.
Yeah, and they stay in a specific order every time, don't they?
Not all the time, but most of the time, absolutely. Like a structure.
Yeah.
We can go into that in a sec, because I like where you're going with this. Saw lots of deer, and one of the things I saw was the biggest stag I ever saw. Twice my weight easy, and I'm 100 kilos, so I'm not the lightest person out there. If you go to even Scotland, the big stags up there rarely even break 100. So living with wolves tends to make these deer have to be bigger and stronger. This guy cut through that snow like it was butter. It was nothing. It was very, very interesting. Of course, you have to talk to locals about these sorts of things, because wolves are actually very controversial, if you didn't know that. No matter where they live, there tends to be some form of controversy, because they are big predators. But it was interesting to see that bears, which are technically more dangerous on average, still nowhere near as dangerous as a domestic dog, they were held in higher favor, which was very interesting to see. But we'll get more into conflict in the future. What is a wolf? Well, it's one of those things. So a wolf is the world's largest canine. They eat ungulates, which are hoofed animals, smaller predators, including badgers and foxes. Occasionally, they will eat root vegetables as well. But they are a hypercarnivore. Most of their diet is made up of meat. They're what's called a generalist. A generalist species, these guys do very good. It means they're not specialized in one thing. Their diet can be roe deer one area, wild boar another. It could be, if you're a dingo, which is technically a subspecies of wolf, could be kangaroos. Fantastic. So around 38 subspecies around the world, all technically a type of grey wolf. So it'd be Canis lupus something else's. But because of that, they're extremely adaptable. You see the size range here, 19 kilos. That is very, very light. Those are wolves found in places like India and Arabia. Whereas 96, very, very, very rare. These animals rarely ever get that big. But those are animals you'll find in places like deep Russia or even very far north in Alaska and Canada. Most average around 40.
Just on weight, Penny's 21 kilos. If that's
So she's bigger than an Arabian wolf.
if that's helpful for people to picture what 19 would look like, it's just shy of Penny.
Exactly. So even though these animals can range massively, the average Eurasian wolf, which is this species that used to be native to the UK, they average around 40, 50 kilos. Usually the males are slightly bigger.
What accounts for that difference?
So there's this really cool thing called Bergman's law in hot-blooded animals. Think about polar bears. In a colder climate, you have to be bigger. You got to be rounder. You got to have more mass because that retains heat. Whereas in a colder climate, like in Indonesia, where you have the sun bear, which is only around 50 kilos, a little guy, really small, has to lose heat. It's got a long body, but they almost look like a person in a suit. And that was actually in the news a few months ago.
Yes.
So as I said, they're found throughout the northern hemisphere, naturally, but dingoes, since they're a subspecies and potentially a type of dog, they have been spread around the world to places like Australia, where they are the apex predator on the land. They're a keystone species. So the last talk talked about native species. This is my favorite native species. Keystone species are animals that have more influence over their environment than they have any reason to be. Like beavers, they create habitat through biodiversity, they help slow rivers, they impact the landscape more than any other species bar humans. Wolves are a keystone species because they impact their prey in a very, very specific way. And they're terrified of people. Even when I spent weeks in Slovakia, trekking through the wilderness, up and down mountains, 10 to 20 kilometers a day, I'm tired even just saying it, I didn't see a single one. We found kills that were so fresh you touched it and it hadn't gone through rigor mortis yet. It was still warm. But the wolves saw us, they smelt us, they heard us, they're like, no guys, we're out. Terrified. Wolves in Britain. So the Eurasian wolf had been here for 225,000 years before humans killed them off around 200 years ago. Humans only got here around 44,000 years ago. That is shockingly not that long. And there was a period of time where the ice caps kept coming back and basically making a lot of Britain uninhabitable. So the Neanderthals got here first, they died out and then came back, and then Homo sapiens, which are modern humans, they came in. So it's kind of like wishy-washy, but the wolf has been here a lot longer than us. They held on a little longer on average in Scotland, I believe, but Ireland used to have such a high population of wolves, it was once called Wolfland. And that goes into the culture and the folklore. Wolves have some of the most ranging in terms of how much people care or hate them of any animal. This is a very very common type of woodcut that occurs throughout history. It's like, the last wolf that was killed in Scotland was killed by so-and-so with a mighty spear. He held it by the throat and his dogs were at its side. Whereas in reality, the last wolf probably died alone in a cave somewhere, which is a really sad thing to think about. But these animals have been painted as villains in history. You can probably think of Little Red Riding Hood. Werewolves are a good example of something where the actual animal itself is just like, nah, I can't be bothered. Just want to eat a sheep every so often, maybe. But there are good things. Right here, this is a really interesting story. Forget his name, but it doesn't matter. So a priest was wandering through the countryside when he was approached by a wolf. The wolf said to him, because it could talk for some reason, it said, my wife is dying, can you do last rites? I know I'm a wolf, but please just... He was like, you know what? Everyone deserves the love of God, so-and-so. How the story goes, he went, gave last rites, and that was an interesting time period for that to happen, because during that period, everyone seemed to hate wolves. So that stands out as one of the positive things. But there's place names throughout the UK that you might not associate with wolves. Can anyone give me a suggestion that might be associated with wolves? Wolverhampton, perfect example, yes. Places like Wolverhampton are directly linked, very easy to tell. But there are places like Ulverston, anything with Ulver in it, or Ulf, are ancient English, German, Norse for wolf. There's also names of people. There's a comedian called Michael McIntyre. That's an Irish name, and Mactyr, or Mactyr, is an old Gaelic Irish word which means son of the land or wolf, which is really, really interesting. This book goes throughout the lost history of wolves in Britain. A lot of it is very sad and depressing, so you might want to take it very slow, but it is really interesting to see our history with these amazing animals over time. They were the last of the apex predators. We're supposed to have 3 apex predators in the UK, the Eurasian brown bear, the wolf, and the lynx. In order of that, largest to smallest. The wolf's greatest enemy, though, throughout its history, what do you think is the worst enemy?
Humans.
Fire.
These are all good answers. These are all good answers. Humans is very good and very arguable as well. What are we thinking? I've heard fire, heard humans. Any more? Bears. Definitely in a natural setting, I would definitely say competing with bears is an issue, but...
The sounds. That doesn't surprise me, she's a bastard.
So it's not the actual animals themselves that are the issue, because wolves kill and eat sheep across the world. It's an issue that does need to be said. Wolves will eat sheep, and that's why they're not here anymore. Back when sheep were first introduced, because sheep aren't native, they have never been native to the British Isles. They're actually from the Middle East. And this group of animals, they were very good for making money. The wool trade got Britain on its feet and made it one of the powerhouses of the world it is today. And because of that, wolves were seen as an issue. These are animals that would occasionally take sheep or even wipe out entire flocks, because if you have them penned in, they can't escape. And as cute as they are, they're not very clever. They usually just stand there like, oh, he's being eaten.
Haven't they been bred to be done for
Yeah.
farming?
A lot of the time, yes, they have. And they've lost a lot of their instincts. And as someone who's like driven up to Scotland and the sheep just like run onto the road in front of you, it is very frustrating. But the main reason we don't have wolves isn't the fact that they're dangerous to us. They're really not. It is the fact that they will kill and eat sheep if the opportunity arises and you make it easy for them. So what did I do? Basically, I looked at this place here, the Lake District National Park. I found a location. I wanted to originally do my study over all of England, because everyone focuses on Scotland when it comes to the reintroduction of wolves, even hypothetical or not. Now, wolves, you could place one in the Highlands at the start of the year, and by the end of the year, it could be in Cornwall. They travel so well. So if you're doing a reintroduction, you have to look at it nationwide, the entire island. So I wanted to do that. Found out I don't have the time or facilities for this, so I focused on a place in England, our largest national park. I had to decide the specific factors. Wolves aren't limited by habitat. I put habitat in here, so I needed to grade habitat depending on how good it is for wolves. If it's a river, in the water, probably not a good place for a wolf to live. If it's a lake, probably not great. If it's a main road, not good. But if it is a farmland, it's actually surprisingly good. Ecologically speaking, wolves can live almost any terrestrial environment. They can live in deserts, they can live in forests, they can live on moorland. They are highly adaptable. Being that generalist species, they don't get restricted by habitat. It's only if they go into a farmer's field where there are animals they are eating. That's the issue. But if they're in cropland where there's deer, maybe the farmers will like them. I had to use this great program, QGIS, if any of you guys know what that is. I'm sorry, it is awful. But basically, I had to put all these factors together. Human pop means human population. Road density, these two are pretty much the same. Oh dear. Magic. I had to put all these together, and what I found out in total by showing the places that are good and aren't good, this is all the habitat that would be usable for wolves in the Lake District National Park. One of the issues you can see is that it's broken up by a lot of white space. These are areas either somewhat lacking in prey species like deer, or bisected by sheep grazing. But overall, in that entire space, we found 921.5 kilometers squared of suitable habitat. That's enough for between 9 to 25 packs of 5 animals. So that's a lot of animals that could potentially live in just this space. Wolves aren't going to come to this border though and be like, can't go past here. That's not the Lake District, can't live there. No, they would leave before it ever gets that dense. So, who here loves the British countryside? Isn't that gorgeous? Can I get a show of hands of how gorgeous? Like, who thinks that's gorgeous? It is beautiful, isn't it? That's because it's not Britain.
Yeah.
That was Germany. Germany has over 1,000 wolves currently, and these are animals that are going over the border anyway. But unfortunately, a lot of Britain is denuded of its natural habitat, which for most of it would be Celtic rainforest. Rainforest isn't just limited to the tropics. Rainforest is just dictated, is it wet enough? And are there trees? Yes, yes. Plenty of vegetation? Good, it's a rainforest. And ours used to be so biodiverse, but today, most of our uplands especially are reduced to just heathland, which is not natural in the way that it is here. Moorland is very human-made in our ecosystem. It does occur naturally, but at a much lower scale than what it is today. Most of this is through historic deforestation. People cut down the trees, but they're unable to grow back because we have too many sheep grazing on these lands, and we have too many deer. People in here might not have seen a deer in their entire life in the wild, but they are out there. They are our native species, 2 million at least of our native species, the red and roe. But we also have 4 non-native, potentially invasive species of deer that are also grazing and browsing these areas, preventing that natural regeneration that should be taking place. And even here, you can see in these patches, this isn't from deer, this is from like more upland burning for grouse shooting, which is a different issue altogether. It's creating unnaturally high numbers of grouse and all sorts of other things. But when we eradicated the wolf, we eradicated the main predator of deer, and that is the biggest issue. You can also see that this land can have trees because they are growing in these patches, but they're only plantations, which is a small patch of woodland that isn't very good for biodiversity because it's like 1 or 2 species. Usually non-native trees like Sitka spruce or Norway pines. But there are really nice places. This is a patch here in Wales That is a type of rainforest. You can see the biodiversity alone is absolutely stunning. Got these mosses. Oh, I love moss. Moss is amazing. It's so absorbent and fluffy. You fall on that, you don't even notice. It's gorgeous. Got different species of ferns, different ages of trees. If you go into a forest where there's deer or sheep grazing, you'll only have the tall adult trees. In places where there's wolves or absent grazing or browsing, you have different ages of trees because they will replace those adults when they are older. But unfortunately, the UK only has around 14% tree cover as opposed to its historic 80% tree cover. That is abysmal. It's monocultural, as I said. This is actually Haweswater Reservoir in Lake District. And there's my worst enemy. Oh, go back. I didn't even touch it. There's my worst enemy, the sheep. I just want to say I don't actually hate sheep. I've helped raise them at Greenacres. They're adorable. They wag their tails when you give them their bottle. It's so sweet. But I don't like them acting like locusts on our countryside, because that's one of the biggest issues. We are ranked bottom 10% for biodiversity. I know, I'm just spouting all this sad stuff. Sad, sad, sad. Is there anything good in the world? There will be, trust me. But the bare bones of the issue, there are too many sheep on our landscape, and this is because there is a massive incentive for a lot of landowners to just have sheep on the land. They're relatively low maintenance, and the industry itself wouldn't really survive into the modern day with the amount of sheep we have without subsidies. That's another issue that's going into the political area. I'm not here to be political, I'm here to say I don't like sheep. We also have too many plantations, as I said. Unnatural trees, non-native trees, non-native trees. Some natural regeneration here, because Haweswater is really trying to fence out the deer and sheep. There's a very small bit here you can see that has a fence around it, but it's early days, so you can't see much. I don't like our national parks. National parks in the UK aren't there for wildlife. They are a cultural place, and that's fine. Human culture is very important, but they are only there for that. There is only one national park in the UK where its cultural connection is so close to the natural regeneration and health of the ecosystem that it's actually good in terms of wildlife. And that is the Cairngorms National Park, because it focuses on the pine forest, a very rare habitat. Bless you very much. Sound a little bit like a duck there. Absolutely quackers. So there's not enough natural spaces. Most of our countryside, even when it's not being used for farming, is just left barren because a lot of people out there just want to keep it as this homogeneous, barren landscape. A lot of us come to think this is a natural thing. It is not. Going on to what wolves do for nature. Trigger warning, these guys are attacking a deer. These are Spanish wolves. These are Iberian wolves attacking a red stag over in Spain. But this is what wolves do. Wolves create something that we just can't. Because we, even if we go out and call a bunch of deer, we aren't creating a landscape of fear. That wasn't supposed to rhyme, but I'm glad it did. So wolves, they are constantly in the ecosystem. They are constantly around there. A constant threat to ungulates like deer and wild boar. So they don't graze or browse enough in one spot to denude it of vegetation before moving on. Right now, deer just eat, oh, nothing left, then they move on. If there's wolves, they eat, look around, move on. Eat, look around, move on. And that gives nature a time to regenerate, to bring back these trees and replace those the older ones with younger ones. They call the sick and the weak. So right now, remember what I said before, with the Slovakian deer being big and strong because they need to fight off predators. The ones here are just like, I'm surviving, I can do it. Because it's easy. It's very, very easy for them to survive because there's nothing picking them off. So if you are a hunter and you want a good, healthy animal to eat in the UK, wolves would help with that. That's an amazing thing. But they also help control mesocarnivores. And the previous talk did talk about foxes, and I love foxes. They're very, very cute. They're lovely animals, and they are vital members of our ecosystem. But foxes and badgers are too abundant now because they have no predators. Unlike apex predators, which do not exceed their environment's prey source or their food source. They control their own numbers through fighting with each other. If there's too many wolves in one area, they'll literally kill each other until there's not that many wolves. Whereas things like foxes and badgers, they will keep breeding, and make their numbers too big until they exhaust it. This is seen throughout the world. And it's part of our fault here in the UK, because there's tons of releases of pheasants into the countryside. Bloody hate seeing those, almost as much as I hate seeing sheep, because they're a non-native species, and foxes eat all those guys. And by having too many foxes or badgers, you don't have a lot of hedgehogs in certain areas. You don't have a lot of ground nesting birds. So what wolves would do in that sense, by eating or even keeping the foxes and badgers fearful of going in these open spaces or being out too much, they help protect the smaller animals, the small mammals, the ground nesting birds, reptiles, amphibians. Even if they occasionally eat like a capercaillie, the net gain of their presence far, far exceeds any losses that come to the occasional nibble. Because they usually locally specialize in one or two species. And if that one or two species aren't available, they'll occasionally just eat another thing. But where they live, say in Iberia, these guys will eat red and roe deer. They'll make up the bulk of their food. Slovakia, red deer and wild boar. Here in the UK, any of those hoofed animals are game. There's so many, they just be like walking up into a supermarket. They provide us, by killing these animals, eating their fill and leaving, they provide carcasses and spread nutrients onto the land for scavengers. Things like eagles that are very low in number in the UK, especially in England. I think they're absent here in Wales completely. But ravens would become more common. All sorts of species would benefit from these carcasses. They aid in the creation of those complex vegetation communities because of what they do to deer. They just stop them grazing too much or browsing too much. And all of this has a trophic cascade, which creates more biodiversity and it sequesters more carbon. Have you ever heard of the term carbon-based life form? Like an alien usually says it in a movie or something. It's because we are all carbon-based life forms. Every living thing sequesters carbon in its body by existing. And trees, bloody good at it. Here's a good example of what they're doing over in the Netherlands, a place that is more densely packed with people than we are in the UK. Wolves, they are everywhere in Europe, except the island nations of Ireland and the UK. So many different things on this. Got lovely little linnets, little moths, so many nice flowers. Love the flowers. This type of environment just wouldn't be able to exist without that large apex predator. We don't do that job. We can hunt as much as we want, but we just don't do that job. Here's the most famous example. Yellowstone National Park. When the Mackenzie Valley wolves from Canada were reintroduced into the national park, that was, I'm just going to walk over here and point to it as well. Got the overabundance of coyotes. So in the UK, that would be foxes instead. Instead of red deer, they have elk, which is a sister taxa. Means really close related. And these trees, only adults are existing. Very denuded landscape. But then we see this when the wolves come back. The deer are still present, but there's also eagles, ravens. The bears come back. Because the bears, they're able to feed off these kills. They're not as good at catching deer as wolves are. Wolves have stamina for days. Bears are more like bodybuilders. They're strong, but they don't last very long. So many different small birds, mammals, beavers were able to come back and make these more dynamic ecosystems because they weren't getting eaten out of house and home by the elk. And now you've got the younger generations of trees coming through, beautiful landscape. And this is a almost up-to-date map. It's from 2019. Today, wolves are on every single mainland country in Europe. If there wasn't water there, we would have them right now. Anyone want to get a bucket with me? But what do wolves do for people? It's all well and good saying that the ecosystem would be a lot better because we are missing an apex predator. It's like having a clock without a cog. That big cog that will make the clock tick isn't there. But what about the ecosystem, the human value, the direct revenue? Well, the Yellowstone every year brings in 35 to 53.5 million to the local economy a year, and that's just the Yellowstone ecosystem. There are wolves in other parts of America and Canada that bring in more tourism money, so that is a massive incentive. And just the La Culebra region in Spain alone brings in almost €500,000. That is just one region of Spain. Look at these Spaniards. Look at them. I'm jealous. I haven't done that yet, but I would, and I'd pay for it. And this is so cool. So wolves, terrified of people, they save lives though. By making deer move around and not linger by roads, they limit road traffic collisions by 24%. This means they have a net gain. Well, they save people money, worth of damages, but they save lives. People die annually, even here in the UK, colliding with deer in their cars. Wolves help prevent that. It's not the massivest amount, if that's a word, but it is really, really important to think about. They protect plantations. Not a massive fan of plantations because they're homogeneous, but they help protect them from deer eating those young trees, so it's good for us and our timber community. I spoke to a ranger at the Forestry Commission. He was like, just do it, mate. Just get it done. I'm sick of shooting them, which they do have to do, unfortunately. They help prevent disease spread. In Slovakia, currently there's a disease called African swine fever, which came over from Africa from importing of different meats, and it's unfortunately got into the wild boar population, and it can devastate entire herds of pigs. It can kill pigs. But if that animal is weakened by a disease, wolves will go for that first. Because if you're a predator, you do not want to have to deal with the strongest animals. You want to go for the sick, the weak, the unhealthy, the young and old. And that's what they do. They cull the weak, and they're very good at it. They make the population stronger, as I said. Better meat for hunters, better trophies if you want to do trophies. And they control the mesocarnivores, as I said. But in places like America, it would be they control the coyotes. They might also help with the mink here, occasionally, around the water sources, so that's a plus. They also, in Europe, help keep jackals down, which is basically Europe's answer to the coyote. And they instill a sense of connection to the landscape, which no other species I've come across quite can. Hedgehogs, lovely little guys. There was a push to make them our national animal at one point. It didn't go through, though. I can guess why, but again, it's having that connection. You can see these people are just thrilled to see what is essentially a really big dog. Those are my feet. That's me in Canada. That's Banff National Park, one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. They had wolves, grizzly bears, black bears, elk, moose, lynx, so diverse. That street was called Wolf Street, if you can see it here. They celebrate every facet of their wildlife. Not a single person I spoke to had any issues with them. And I think that's a beautiful thing. They found a way to work with those animals. And that's probably because that is their livelihood, their tourism.
My dad went to Canada, and he said he's been to other places in America as well, and he said biggest difference between the two sets of people is in Canada. They, like you say, they value their wildlife beautifully, while other places find them as a pest. Like there's signs going like, make sure you like keep the noise down and like don't leave food everywhere because the bears like come and stuff like that. While in Canada they more celebrate and go, oh well, you can't go this way because there's bears there and they have happy there. You
Exactly,
know what I mean?
I experienced that exact same thing. There are signs saying like, well, we're closing this trail now because we're using it as a nature corridor throughout the winter and autumn months.
Yeah.
And that, you would not get that here.
No.
Like, we have 3 wildlife bridges in the UK that go over main motorways. In Banff alone, they have like 38. And that is it's not the biggest national park. It is big, but it's not the biggest. And this is in the Netherlands. That is a young male wolf likely looking for a mate. So he's not as shy as he should be. Eventually, when he's older, he will. But right now, he's like, trying to find a girlfriend. Bloody hell, all these apes are just standing taking pictures of me. But people are excited. They stop and take pictures because this is an incredible animal. This is a wolf shrine in Japan. Unfortunately, wolves are extinct in Japan because when European sentimentalities came over there, it spread like wildfire and they did eradicate them. Or did they? Where's my picture? Okay, well, that ruins it.
That is exciting.
Wow.
Okay, I'll.
That is a great find.
There's supposed to be a wolf here that's stalking in the forest of Japan that was captured on a camera trap. It was captured just a few years ago. And the reason this is so exciting is because in Japan, they thought they eradicated all of them. And unlike the UK, where our native wolf is still alive on the continent, the Honshu wolf in Japan and the Hokkaido wolf, they were very specific species of grey wolves. So if they're still milling around in the forests of Japan, just imagine, close your eyes, the picture's there, it looks great. Why is it not there? Then that is really, really interesting, and it goes to show why their forests are still relatively intact, despite killing off their apex predators, except their brown and black bears, which they do still have over there. But wolves do bring conflict. Of course they do. They're a big apex predator. And if you are a cow or a sheep, you're probably not going to be too happy to see a wolf. This one doesn't seem too pleased. It's a little confused. I don't know how they got that shot. Either they're really close to it and the wolf doesn't care, or they've got a very good camera. People are scared of wolves. They are scary. Not to me, but they are apparently scary. Wolves haven't killed a single person in Europe since 1882. Now, if you put that in perspective to all sorts of different animals, freshwater snails kill thousands of people every single year through the spread of parasites. Cows themselves kill a lot more people than wolves. And again, this is a long time ago, and this was when rabies was a lot more apparent. That's the thing. We don't have rabies in the UK. We don't have rabies in Ireland. We are very, very strict when it comes to importing anything that could have rabies in it. And an animal with rabies, like a wolf, that is the most dangerous time because they have lost their natural senses. They aren't acting like an actual wolf. They're acting more like a zombie from a movie. Wolves will kill pets. If you let your dogs roam out, which I think is technically illegal, unsupervised anyway in the UK, so just don't do it. Wolves will see them either as competition or if it's a small dog as a snack. So that just comes with knowing where you are, knowing these animals are around, and just protecting your animals. Cats are very good at avoiding predation as long as they're smart. This is a very controversial statement. I don't like seeing cats outside because they do eat billions of birds every single year, small mammals, and whilst we do have a native cat in the UK that would do that, it does it for food. Cats do it for fun. But again, there are mitigation effects. You can keep your animals in, take them out on leashes, or just be more aware that they're in the area. Wolves will occasionally compete with hunters, but not really. So they will not eradicate deer from the area or wild boar. They will just make them a lot more skittish, which makes it more of an actual sport. Again, I'm not really much of a hunter myself. I don't know if you could tell. I'm not that type of person. But if you do want to hunt for food, which I think is absolutely fine, this would just make it more of an actual challenge, which if it's a sport anyway, you would want that. And again, they make the animals more healthy, free of parasites as well, and a lot tastier too, so I've heard. Wolves will kill livestock. This is true. As I said with the sheep before, wolves will eat sheep if they are left. But in places like Romania, Portugal, Spain, parts of America, they do things we just don't do here. We leave our animals out in a very accessible area, especially if it's sheep, tiny little fence. The sheep themselves get onto the road all the time. Whereas in places that I've mentioned, they have electric fencing because they know they're living alongside these apex predators. It's about getting that methodology in place that really does help them. And that's why I want to talk about this, living with wolves. So this isn't even electrified. This is a small flock of sheep guarded by a livestock guardian dog. It has been very, very effective on the mainland at preventing animals being taken by not just wolves, but bears and lynx. Lynx, if they see this dog, they're running for the hills. They think it's just a big fluffy white wolf. If it is a bear, they're like, oh, don't want to have to deal with that. No, I'll eat some grass or something. Bears really only eat like 80% vegetation anyway, and like the rest is meat, so it's barely anything. But the wolves, if they see there is a pack of other wolves, which is how they see these dogs in these paddocks, that puts them off because wolves choose the most efficient prey. If you are living in the wild, every day is a struggle to survive. So you don't want to pick a fight with a weirdly protective wolf to get at its sheep. You want to choose an animal that's not behind a fence. You want to choose deer, you want to choose wild boar, and it has been remarkably useful. No rabies in the UK or Ireland, as I said. Education programs are important to make this thing possible. We need to change farming methods in the UK. Our sheep farming especially is just not sustainable in the slightest. If you're a smallholder, that's sustainable. But the fact you see millions of sheep on the landscape, it just can't keep going because the numbers increase every single year, and it just can't keep going on. Even without having wolves or the idea of wolves being in here, it just destroys the landscape too much, causes too much runoff, and it's coming from our tax money to keep that organization or that industry afloat because it's not really giving us any money in return. Or if it is, not that much. We actually have to start looking into different industries other than just having our countryside for farmers or for play areas for a lot of the more wealthy individuals, which tend to be the people who are able to hunt, who are able to own land. I'm an urbanite. I was born and raised in a town that's very built up, but I have spent lots of time in wild places. I know this can be done. And I would love to have access to the countryside. True livestock shepherds, because we don't have shepherding in the UK. A person who raises sheep is a sheep farmer. Someone who stays with the sheep, checks on the sheep, makes sure that they're safe, they're not dying, they're not sick or injured, not being attacked by predators. That is a shepherd. There's a key distinction. You can start hiring people to look after livestock, and just the presence of a human being with the sheep, that is enough to deter wolves, and it's very effective. Same as guardian animals. Government grants really help this. In Italy, we've seen some of the most successful wolf restoration. Wolves have come back because the livestock farmers have tolerated them. Because they're not just getting paid for every animal killed. They're getting paid just because there's wolves in the area. You could go years without a wolf taking a single sheep. The government's like, here's some money, here's some money, here's some money. And if I was a farmer, I would like that very much. It's like, without the wolves, they don't get that money. So it creates an incentive. And streamlining it, if an animal is killed by wolves, to get their money back, not just worth of the sheep, but all the trouble they've gone through, that is also very important. So what can you do to help this cause? It's not just about wolves, it's about restoring a vital part of the ecology of Britain. And all these organizations here work to help with ecological restoration / rewilding. Rewilding Britain. I'm kind of fond of them, if you can tell. Their logo is a wolf paw, because that is the biggest target on their tree. Right now, they have no ideas of introducing them, but they're hopeful in the future when we're a lot more open to the idea that it'll be possible. Scotland, the big picture. Mountains made of a wolf's tail. Very, very clever. Rewilding Europe, they are working in the UK, but they're also working abroad with wolves and other species. Trees for Life, doing what wolf presence would do. They're planting trees throughout the uplands where they are most necessary. And there's that weirdo down in London campaigning with a bunch of other nature nerds, wearing a top that's probably a little too tight. But what you can do is you can campaign, spread awareness, boycott products that you don't think is sustainable. I'm not going to tell you who to boycott, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but certain things just aren't sustainable, and boycotting them, telling them why you're doing this, that gives people incentive to do the right thing. volunteering with these organizations, supporting conservation rewilding charities, and telling your MPs. Because MPs, they only do what they think the public wants. And if the public wants more biodiversity in your landscape, again, not just for wolves, for biodiversity, native species in general, you need to tell them that, or else they're not going to know. Any questions?
The whole sheep farming industry, I know even farmers have said there's no money in sheep farming. Why are they still doing it?
It's largely cultural. So sheep farming in the UK as a whole, but specifically a lot in the Celtic nations like Cornwall, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, it was forced upon them. It's not even a traditional thing. It's become a big part of tradition here in Wales because you go everywhere you see sheep. But the traditional method of farming was having pigs and cattle on the landscape, two animals that actually do have native ancestors to the UK's species, the oryx and the wild boar, so the land can work with them. That worked a little bit more in harmony, more holistically. But when sheep were brought over, I'm not really much of a historian myself, so I couldn't tell you if it was the Romans or the English or whatnot. They did force this more on the indigenous peoples of the landscape, and unfortunately, a lot of people have grown up thinking this is what they want to do because it's part of their history, even though it's tantamount to other cultural invasions and colonization methods.
Also, a lot of the land that I know that you're saying, oh, we should be growing trees and stuff on here. A lot of the land, especially in different areas of Wales, you can't grow stuff on at the moment because the biodiversity is rubbish. If we did reintroduce wolves and things got better and blah blah blah, that would work. But in a lot of places, you can't grow stuff, so they can't grow crops. So that's why they're doing the sheep. My husband's a butcher, he's a massive nerd about the whole thing. It's a strange interest that I happen to know a lot about. So yeah.
It is true. A lot of these areas where you will find sheep, especially in the uplands, sheep are able to deal with the slopes a lot more and places like that.
But a lot of the land you can't physically plant stuff in.
Yeah, planting crops in those areas, again, not really.
It's just basically one cut grass.
Yeah, and it struggles to grow, so where sheep can live on just that, whereas other things, you plant it, it doesn't grow. I don't know if you've got a garden, if you try planting stuff, it really struggles to grow in Wales. All my plants I've been
It is all about finding the right species to plant, because one of my slides did say, if others in different countries can live with lions and elephants and crocodiles, all animals are a lot more dangerous to people than wolves are, why are we struggling with what is essentially a really big dog that is scared of people? We do have methods of dealing with livestock predation, and we do have ways of making those places that are currently kind of not great for growing crops better. And one of the reasons they're not good for crops is because having decades, centuries without good levels of predation and overgrazing, it erodes the soils. It makes the soils not good. But if you had those plants locking in the moisture, like we've just recently had all these floods, we'd have less floods if we had more plants, especially our indigenous ecosystems like rainforests, the different vegetation communities. It would be a wonderful sight to behold. They're basically just the first domino that goes down the rest of them, causing all these changes, a trophic cascade. But yeah.
What do you think's the biggest stumbling block for reintroducing wolves?
I would say conceptions. It is easy for me to say a wolf will not kill you if a wolf is introduced. But they could be like, what about this case from 1785 where a wolf ate 5 people? Well, it likely either had rabies or they're just telling porkies. It's trying to get people to see the animal instead of the monster, because it has become a monster. Considering it is the closest living thing to our domestic dogs, our best friends, it has become one of our worst enemies, but it's mainly because of those cultural connotations with it. The big bad wolf, the werewolf, these monsters.
Sort of like Jaws.
Exactly. Steven Spielberg hated the fact he made Jaws because it put a target on sharks' heads. I've swam in water with bull sharks and other animals. spooky, honestly, scariest experience of my life. But they didn't want to eat me. Right there, like an animal this thick and way, way too long just swam between me when I was standing in the water this deep and was like, I'm just going to go give birth to some pups. Ignoring me completely. No worries, I'm just going to finish here so people can do the thing, but if you have any questions, feel free to come up to me and I will answer any and all that you have. But thank you very much for having me.
Thanks very much.